I talk a lot in my videos about power, and it's for good reason because where we are going, our relationship to power and our understanding on how it works is shifting. And so I want to talk more about that, and I'm not going to do it all in this video because there's so much to say, but I will go a bit deeper into it today and then continue to share videos on the dynamic, the game of power and how it's changing. So in today's video, I wanted to start with something that I wrote a couple of days ago, and then we'll get into the topic a bit more. So we start with the question, why is forgiveness so hard? Because resentment offers a false virtue, a sense of duty, of moral entitlement, of being owed something. And that kind of influence is hard to surrender. It's currency in the game of adversary and mimicry, a protection spell for the ego that would rather bargain with power than lay it down in faith. Some will say you don't need forgiveness, and to that I agree, once you've mastered it. Once you've mastered the moment, you no longer grip to the past. Here there is nothing left to forgive. This is what true presence is, because you must be willing to unhook at a moment's notice, and when the right moment comes. Not because you don't care, but because you have mastered the law of rhythm. The deeper essence of forgiveness is this, that true power isn't about how much you can control and influence, it's about how much you can let go of the need to influence and control. And this is essential training for the mind. It's not an easy one, because the black mirror culture of today has flipped the roles, making vengeance look like virtue and surrender look like weakness. But that spell is breaking now, and the only ones who will walk free are those who have learned how to let go at the right moment. So I share that because it's intrinsically linked with the law of rhythm. Forgiveness is something that we use as a technology to keep us working with the law of rhythm. And law is something that I also talk about a lot in my videos because we are in a system of law, and when we understand how the laws work, then we can work with them to work more coherently and harmoniously with creator and creation, rather than feeling like we are at the behest of everything that happens. So forgiveness is the technology, the gateway to accessing the law of rhythm. It's not about condoning what someone did. It's not about saying what happened was okay. It's about understanding what you need to do to get from A to B, how you can move forward after a pattern has been expressed. Because as I touched on in that video, many people will sit in certain patterns like the victim and use that as a currency which gains them some sort of influence and control in the game of relational dynamics, persona, identity, all these things. But after a while, if that pattern is not released, then it starts to become stagnant, it starts to crystallize, it starts to create rigidity in the body, and that's essentially where disease is going to come from. So when you look at the law of rhythm, it tells us that everything in nature is subject to seasons and cycles, that everything is born, experiences, passes away, and integrated and transcended, and that's the way that nature works. Whether it's thoughts, feelings, physical things out here, seasons and cycles in nature, wherever you look, you'll find the law of rhythm in action. And so we have to be looking at how we are working with or working against that law. So forgiveness is about accessing the law of rhythm and keeping yourself in balance with nature. Because what we have to remember about creation is that it's just the projection, it's just an image that is on and off, on and off, on and off, millions of times a second, so quickly in fact that we can't see the flickering. It just seems like one stream, one current, one image that's flowing. But really everything that you're seeing and perceiving is a reflection of the past. And so the minute you start to buy into and hook into any images that are fleeting, you're essentially taking part in an archetypal drama which is possessed by time, under the spell of time. The soul sits in the eternal seat of I am and just watches it all pass by. That perspective sits in eternity, where it knows that I am eternally right here. And of course we hook into narratives because we want to experience a role, we want to play a game, but we have to be willing to look at when is the time for that to be released, when have I learnt from that pattern, and how is it now draining me rather than feeding me. So Many people talk about things like archons, and this is essentially this dynamic I'm going to get into now, because archons are seen as these demonic entities that are feeding off us while we exist in some louche farm. But that is really a juvenile perspective, because an archon is just a pattern. It's a pattern that we buy into to help us explain chaos, help us make sense and order of this mysterious realm. So there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's a way that we can go on a journey so we can understand ourselves through mythology. But what we do is we reach for these patterns when we are destabilized, when we are emotional, when we are in reactivity. And they are familiar, so we keep choosing them because we know how they work. But what happens over time is they end up draining us of our power, because we are giving ourselves over essentially to the past, a dead entity that doesn't really exist. So we're feeding a narrative, fluffing it up, and creating more and more distortion in the field. So we have to be looking at and prepared to recognize, when is the moment that I am going to unhook from this narrative. The victim is one that is very powerful in the world today, and the reason is because the more people choose it, the stronger the influence it has in the field. And so when a person is feeling attacked or feeling hard done to, that narrative, that archetype is easily accessible. And so the individual must be willing to let it go when the moment is right. And the more people do that, the easier it will be for that pattern to deanimate in the collective field. But it's still out there. And it's not just the patterns that we pick when we are feeling harmed. There are patterns out there that are being used in the spiritual world as well. Let's say the truther, the conspiracy community, sentiments of being awake. People talk about being a starseed or a light worker, but quite often those narratives are there as a barrier between themselves and another. And a lot of the time they are there because it's about a person needing a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. But identity is the root of separation. It's where the game of duality really begins, to say I am this and you are that. Whereas the soul sits in the eternal presence of I am, and this is all me. So what I'm trying to get at here is understanding how when we hook into a narrative, we are essentially playing a game of duality that, if we don't keep a check on objectively, can start to become a point of draining, can start to become a point of disease and disharmony in our system. The final enemy that we're really all facing is the part of ourselves that still uses a narrative to defend its right to be separate from another, that says, this has happened to me, therefore I feel like this about them, they are this, I am that. That's the final enemy to defeat, is the one that gives you an excuse to be unkind, that gives you an excuse to separate yourself and resent another person, because there is no truth in that. So power, it's not about how much you can control and influence, it's about how much you can release the need to influence and control. Because when you are being challenged by something, you can decide to sit in the seat of the Holy Witness, who does not need to bite, who does not need to feed the distortion with their own life force, and can simply sit there and let it pass by, because everything will pass by. And so this is the new understanding of power. It's been inverted, but to correct it is to sit in the seat of the witness and say, I'm going to pick my battles. I'm not going to get involved in something that's not going to serve me or creation or creator. It's about allowing the will of God to come through. The seated presence of I am that says, it is what it is, and I see how the law works. And now from this seat of presence, I get to choose how I engage the laws, rather than engaging them through reaction and creating more of the same. To react is to do again, but to choose from the seat of the Holy Witness is to say, what am I going to do with my life force that is going to have the most beneficial effect for the whole? Because we really know that we're all one. And if we know that, then who are we still against? That's the biggest question.